Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is an LDS mother of 3 LGBTQ kids. Welcome to the podcast, Barbara Higinbotham.
I'm happy to be here.
I got to meet Barbara about a week ago at North Star. It was great to visit with her and feel her good heart. Just a little bit about Barbara, and she'll go through this. She is a returned missionary from the Dominican Republic. She is about my age, I think a few years younger, in her early 60s. Her and her husband recently returned as missionaries in Farmington, New Mexico. They returned in January 2024. They live in Utah County, and they have 5 living kids. They also lost twins at about 21 weeks, and that will come up during the podcast. Barbara and her husband's 2 of their kiddos have been on the podcast. Ben, who Barbara will talk about in the podcast, is their non-binary child. And Ben, who goes mostly by they, them, I believe, was on episode 789 and did just a terrific job. So Barbara's going to tell more of the story from a parent's perspective. And also she has a gay son, Matt, who just got home from his mission. He was on episode 812, and I got to meet Matt at North Star. He served a great mission, so brave and courageous, and had the courage to come on the podcast and share his story. So I love that Barbara wants to be, I kind of invited, I can't remember how this happened, but I think I encouraged Barbara. Maybe she'd share her story, and she's so prepared, and she's written out exactly what she wants to share. And I think that's just getting insight into Barbara and her level of preparation to be able to share her story for you, our listeners. And we said a prayer before we started that this will just be helpful to you. If you're a parent, you're a local leader, if you're just somebody who wants to better understand LGBTQ Latter-day Saints, Barbara knows this space well as a parent, and also just her journey. She's going to share some of her journey just connecting to this group. And when we know better, we do better, which is kind of part of my story. So is that okay for an introduction, Barbara?
Yes.
And we will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and this has been quite a journey for me, and it's a continual journey that I keep trying to learn. So I'm just going to write what I wrote about this, and I hope that it will help people and realize this is my story. I'm not trying to tell anybody else what they need to do, but hopefully you can find some strength in our experiences. First, I wish to express my testimony of my loving Heavenly Father, His Son, Jesus Christ, and His gospel, which has been restored through the prophet Joseph Smith. I have a testimony that He calls prophets to lead and guide us. I have a testimony that President Russell M. Nelson is the prophet He has called to lead us in our day, and I sustain him and those called to serve with him. I have a testimony of the Holy Ghost who teaches truth to me, and through whom I receive personal revelation. I find joy and peace in the house of the Lord, the temple, and I would like to speak of how time spent there at different times in my life and in the life of my family has brought me strength and has brought our family strength. I also have eternal love for my family. They are dear to me, and I thank the Lord daily for every one of the members of my family. They mean everything to me, and it is an honor to be the wife and mother in this great family. In this podcast, I would like to tell you about each member of my family and the amazing contributions they make. Rather than just use the labels of non-binary, transgender, and gay, I would like you to see the beautiful souls beyond these labels. I would like to say that this is my story. I know that all of you have your own stories, and that as we share our stories, we strengthen each other. I think of what Becky McIntosh says in her book, Love Boldly. She speaks of her love for her faith and for her family. She says she will never leave her faith and she will never leave her family. I feel the same. I will never leave my faith and I will never leave my family, and am eternally grateful for both of them. And I'm indebted to my Savior who makes it possible for me to be true to both. And I sustain those who He has called to lead us. In Mosiah chapter 4, verse 9 in the Book of Mormon, we read, "Believe in God, believe that He is, and that He created all things, both in heaven and in earth. Believe that He has all wisdom and all power, both in heaven and in earth. Believe that man doth not comprehend all the things which the Lord can comprehend. I do believe in God, and have faith in Him and in His works. His ways are higher than mine, as we read in Isaiah chapter 55, 8 through 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. My faith in God and in his ways strengthens me as I face the perplexity of our situation with one non-binary child, one transgender daughter, and one gay son. I would like to tell you a little about my experiences with the LGBT community as I was growing up, and then I would like to tell you a little bit about my family. In doing so, I will also tell you about my straight children to give context to our family situation. I was born in 1962 and am now nearing my 63rd birthday in a few weeks. I grew up in a home where my loving parents taught us of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I felt safe with them and my siblings. I have 3 living brothers, 1 brother who passed away at birth, and 2 sisters. I didn't even know about gay people until I was probably in my teens. Even then, it was spoken of in jest, with kids speaking unkindly of gay people, and I didn't know anyone who was gay, or so I thought. I have since learned that there are often closeted members of the LGBT community right around us, and the things we say and do can make a great difference for good or bad. So be careful of what you say, because you never know who might be hearing. The first time I knowingly met someone who was gay was when I was a college student working a summer job. During the summers, my sister and I would work in a business that did laundry for 6 different hospitals in our area in Washington State. My mom also worked there to help us save money for college and missions, and so that a job would be held for us during the summer. One year, as I was about to begin my summer work, one of my friends at the laundry told me that a lesbian woman had been hired. She said, "She touches you, and ew." I mentioned that to my mom, and she set me straight quickly. My mother saw the good in everyone and was accepting of all people, no matter who they were. She told me that she did believe that this woman was a lesbian and said that she didn't touch anyone or do anything offensive. I went to work, fortunately affected more by my mother's attitude than that of my friend. I found my mother to be correct. As I got to know and work with this woman, I found her to be very kind, warm, interested in everyone, and one of my favorite people to work with. There was never anything I saw that showed that she did anything offensive to anyone she worked with. I am so grateful for the lesson my mother taught me. Being gay does not make someone a sexual predator. I grew up in a time when there were assumptions about why people were gay. I tended to believe these assumptions and have since learned that assumptions should be challenged. The beliefs I assumed were true were that people chose to be gay, and that also gay men were a result of a poor relationship with their father. I also believed that if someone was gay, they should keep it to themselves. I didn't talk about being heterosexual, and they didn't need to talk about their sexuality either. And I associated gay people with angry and intolerant people. I didn't consider that there are a lot of angry and intolerant straight people as well. I had a lot to learn. I love what you said in your class at North Star, Richard, about wiping your hard drive clean from what you have assumed and in starting from scratch and learning all over again, this time in a kinder and more loving way, listening to those who walk this road. Like President Nelson has said, when we know better, we do better. And this is what I am trying to do now. I'm trying to be more compassionate in my thoughts and words as I reach out in love to all people, and as I hold on to my faith in Jesus Christ and his restored gospel. I graduated from high school in Mount Vernon, Washington State in 1980, Ricks College in 1982, and then attended a year at Brigham Young University, Provo, after which I served a wonderful mission to the Dominican Republic. Again, I don't remember ever having a conversation with anyone on my mission about LGBTQ situations. I realize that I've been home for nearly 40 years, but I really don't remember it being anything we talked about, other than a part in the discussion on the law of chastity where it said not to do unnatural things. I loved my mission and the people and was blessed to have 4 Dominican companions, which really helped me learn Spanish, a skill that has blessed me in many places throughout my life. The Spirit has blessed me so much throughout my mission as it has throughout my life. After my mission, I returned to BYU, where I finished my last 2 semesters and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education in April 1986. I got a job teaching at Windsor Elementary in Orem, where I taught in the Spanish immersion program for 2 years and then became a music specialist for the younger grades. During this time, I met my amazing husband, Dan, in our singles ward. I was immediately drawn to him because he was a kind man and very faithful in the gospel of Jesus Christ. He loved the temple like I did, and I knew he would always keep his covenants. When we met, I told him that my mother had died 2 years previously of a heart attack, and he said he understood how I felt because his father had died of a heart attack just a year before we met. That was a bonding moment for us, and we became very good friends. He proposed to me on October 4th, 1989, in the celestial room of the Provo Temple, and we were married on December 1st, 1989, in that same temple. We were delighted 10 months later to welcome a beautiful baby into our home on October 5th, 1990. At birth, this baby was a girl, and we gave her a feminine name. We did not previously know the gender, so I had made 2 blessing outfits, a dress for a girl and a little suit for a boy, both from beautiful white material. When I was told she was a girl, I was excited because that dress was so pretty. From here on out, however, I will use they, them pronouns and the name they chose about a year ago, which is Ben. Ben was a delightful child and very smart. Ben developed a testimony of Jesus Christ at a young age and loved seeing the temple. When they were about 3, we were at Temple Square one night. The Salt Lake Temple was lit up and very beautiful. They called out enthusiastically, "Mom, I think I'm getting a testimony." They excelled in school and learned very quickly. They were very obedient and never wanted to do anything to displease us. They started the Spanish immersion program in 1st grade in the same school where I had taught. I quit teaching before Ben was born and learned it quickly. In fact, Ben would often speak to me in Spanish. And I'll insert here that when Ben was young, one of my brothers came out as gay. And at the time, I still didn't understand very much about him, about that situation. But I told him, well, I didn't approve of his lifestyle, that I loved him and he was always welcome in our home. He has been a great support to me as we have had this experience with our rainbow children. When Ben was young, they asked me to sew them a Peter Pan outfit. I sewed a simple pair of green pants, green shorts for warm weather, and a green top. Using a Peter Pan hat bought one year at Disneyland, Ben loved dressing like Peter Pan, and that outfit got a lot of wear. They preferred Peter Pan over Disney princesses, but that didn't worry me. They loved Peter Pan, and so do I. As they grew, they were in programs in elementary school and junior high for gifted and talented children, took piano lessons, and learned to play with beautiful feeling. And they were involved in high school band as well as marching band. They were completely faithful in the gospel, studied their scriptures, graduated from seminary, earned the Young Womanhood recognition, and did well at so many things. They qualified because of their grades and ACT score to receive a full tuition scholarship to BYU. However, they also earned the National Merit Scholarship, which covered even more. So that is the scholarship they took. They majored in music, and it was always a great privilege to attend their band concerts. At the end of their 2nd year at BYU, they chose to serve a mission. They were also accepted into the Nauvoo Brass Band for the summer of 2011 and loved being a young performing missionary and the friendships made there. Well, in Nauvoo, they received their full-time mission call and got to read it in front of the other Nauvoo missionaries in the 70s hall from which early missionaries had departed. And we were able to listen on speakerphone from Utah. They were called to the California San Jose mission speaking Spanish. Because of their skill in Spanish already, they were released early from the MTC and blessed many lives throughout their service. Shortly after Ben returned home, they and I went back to visit the mission, and I could see how greatly they were loved by the people there. Their mission president told me that he could put them in any situation, a trio with sisters with emotional problems or in any situation, and Ben was on autopilot, as he said it. They just kept working hard and doing what the Lord needed them to do. Ben was never a girly girl. They preferred to wear pants and t-shirts instead of dresses. As I look back now, I admire Ben for wearing dresses for 18 months as a missionary. I can only imagine now how hard that must have been, though I was not aware at the time. Shortly after their mission, Ben asked to speak with Dan and me. They told us they were attracted to the same gender. I said about the most idiotic thing I could have said. I asked if they would like therapy to help them overcome the same gender attraction. Since then, I have learned how damaging conversion therapy is. I recently deeply apologized to Ben, who was so gracious. They told me that they had looked for the same kind of therapy before coming out to us. They told us that day they came out that they were still a faithful member of the church. I found myself hoping that they were just nervous around boys because they hadn't dated much. They did show interest in a few great young men, but it wasn't something that lasted. In 2021, they officially came out as queer. They still used the feminine pronouns and name until 2024, when they officially came out as non-binary and started using the name Ben. Prior to coming out, Ben had gone to the temple 6 times in 2 weeks and felt like this was what the Lord wanted them to do. Dan and I were on our mission in New Mexico at the time. It was hard to hear this information, especially since we knew Ben would lose their temple recommend privileges because of social transitioning. We were sad when we got the official word that they would not be able to attend the temple because of the name change and social transitioning. I remembered how they had smiled through their whole endowment ceremony in the Jordan River Temple, and how this was not a decision made lightly. Soon after this experience, I was pouring out my heart to the Lord, still in the mission field. I had never had a reason to doubt the revelations Ben received. They had always been very close to the Spirit. Still, I asked in my prayer if it was true that the Lord had told them to transition, even if it meant losing their temple recommend. It seemed so at odds with what we have been taught. President Nelson is said to do whatever is necessary to keep a temple recommend and to use it. I wanted to understand. The Lord answered me very lovingly. In essence, he kindly told me that it didn't matter to me what the Lord had revealed to Ben. What he needed me to do was listen to Ben and love them completely. I knew this came from God. I felt his love and his peace and chose to focus on love and understanding. This has proven to be what Ben needs and has continually strengthened our relationship and friendship. Truly loving requires more than just talking about it, more than just saying, oh, I love them. I highly recommend studying chapter 6 of Preach My Gospel, where we learn to incorporate Christ-like qualities into our lives. As we seek to become more like Jesus Christ, it becomes more natural to love each other. It's because it becomes a part of who we are. It is active and not passive. It is a beautiful road to walk and makes us feel much more joyful. In the MTC, there are murals where we got to walk and see the different aspects and learn more about them. And it's something that I have not mastered and probably won't in this life, but am continually trying. I told Ben that if they can't go to the temple right now, I will just have to go more on their behalf. Since Dan and I arrived home from our mission on January 22nd of this year, we have been set apart as workers in the Orem Temple and have also attended the temple often as patrons. This past week, I was at a temple every day except Sunday and Monday when they were closed, doing ordinances, playing the organ, working on my shift, or substituting for another sister who couldn't be there. I don't think I'll go that much every week, but I love the temple and plan to keep my promise to Ben. The temple has been dear to me all my life. 2 of my siblings are adopted, and when I was young, I got to go with my family twice to the Logan Temple and kneel around the altar with them as these children were sealed to us. It left a lasting impression in my life. There was no temple in Washington State during the years I was growing up there. The Seattle Temple was dedicated during my freshman year at Ricks College, but my parents and church leaders were generous in providing opportunities to travel on temple trips. On one family vacation, my dad arranged for my sister and me to do baptisms in the Idaho Falls, Salt Lake, Provo, and Ogden temples. When we were visiting relatives in Utah, I would ask him to drive by temples, and he was so generous in doing so. I was delighted to receive my endowment in the Seattle Temple prior to my mission. There was no temple in the Dominican Republic while I was serving, and I decided that I never wanted to be one who lived near a temple and didn't attend. After my mission, my mother passed away of a heart attack, and my dad and I found great strength as we attended the Seattle Temple 60 miles from our home every week. My dad, who grew up during the Great Depression, was usually very frugal with gas, but always considered a trip to the temple to be a good reason to use it. When I returned to BYU that fall, I found great comfort as I attended the Provo Temple often with friends and sometimes by myself. As a young adult while teaching school, I was called to be a Provo Temple worker before it was common for young adults to serve as such. I have always found great comfort in the temple and have been grateful to be able to perform essential ordinances for those who have gone before. When Ben was nearly 10, they accompanied Dan and me to the Dominican Republic for the open house of the Santo Domingo Temple. And recently, when another temple was announced for Santiago Dominican Republic in General Conference, I was very excited to hear that. Our children have chosen to do baptisms for the dead on their 12th birthdays. We have taken them to the temple wherever we were on family vacations. When they would turn 12, the parent of the same gender at that time would take them on a trip to a place in the U.S. of their choice where there was a temple and also fun things to do. We would take them to do baptisms and also to have a good time. Ben and I went to Nauvoo, which later became a very special place for Ben as they served as a young performing missionary in the bagpipe band and with our family in the Nauvoo and British pageants. Rachel and I went to the Laie, Hawaii temple and had a wonderful time. Spencer, Heather, and Matt all chose to go with Dan to Orlando, where they attended the temple, Disney World, and Universal Studios. What great memories we made. The temple is a central part of our lives, as it is the house of the Lord and has been a great strength to me as I have worked to understand the road my children walk in this life. I will back up a bit and tell you about our other children. When Ben was 2, we learned that I was pregnant with twins. We were excited, but there were a lot of problems with the pregnancy, and I had to spend my days on bed rest. It was a roller coaster time because some days looked better for these sweet babies, but other days looked a lot worse. About 4 months into the pregnancy, we learned that one of them had died, and the other had only a 5% chance of survival. He was born a few weeks later and lived only 29 minutes. It was a sad time for us, but also hopeful as we knew that we are an eternal family. We named him Benjamin Alvin because during the pregnancy I had been studying the words of King Benjamin and was deeply touched by them, and because of the vision in Doctrine and Covenants 137, where Joseph Smith saw his brother Alvin in the celestial kingdom. On October 11th, 1994, we felt tremendous joy when Spencer Douglas Higinbotham was born with a strong set of lungs. His older brother had not cried, but he certainly did. We didn't consider him a replacement for Benjamin, but another child to have joy with in our eternal family. Like Ben, Spencer is very bright and did well in school and developed a strong testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He is straight. He also experiences anxiety attacks, and these are sometimes triggered by too much talk about LGBTQ issues. This can be challenging as he knows his siblings need to talk about what is constantly on their minds. Sometimes he will quietly go downstairs where he can have time for himself. He loves his siblings and supports them. He was called in 2013 to serve in the California Santa Rosa mission. It was sweet to attend the Mountain Timpanogos Temple with him when he received his endowment. After serving for 9 months and working as hard as could be expected of anyone, he came home due to extreme anxiety and depression. We felt he gave it everything he had, and we had had conversations with his mission president who really wanted what was best for him. Spencer chose to finish his mission in parts by doing service missions. He served nearly 9 more months in the Family and Church History Headquarters mission, which was a full-time service mission where the missionaries lived away from home, even though he was very close to where his father was working in the church office building, before anxiety brought him home again. He then finished by serving a part-time service mission in Salt Lake City, where he was able to live at home and commute to his mission, where he didn't have to have a companion and where he could watch sports, something that always calmed him down. He is an amazing person who keeps trying. He graduated from BYU, Idaho with a bachelor's degree in actuarial mathematics and attends the temple every week. On March 7th, 1997, we had another cute baby. We didn't know the gender ahead of time, but it became very obvious as this not modest child was born, sunny side up, and we saw everything. LOL. We gave him a masculine name, but from now on out, I will use the name Heather and use she, her pronouns. Heather was and still is extremely brilliant with a spicy personality. At 3, she taught herself how to type on the computer and loved playing computer games. When I would be preparing dinner, she would stand there and tell me the details about a specific game. Even though I was trying to make dinner, watch out for her and other siblings and whatever else was going on, I couldn't get away with just saying yes or oh, good for you, because she would quiz me on what she had said. If we were driving in the van, she would ask me to guess what some abstract thing meant and would give me 3 guesses. When I didn't get it right, she would say, "That was your last guess." When I took her to be tested for kindergarten, the teacher wanted to know how high she could count. Heather said, "I counted to 1,000 once, but it took me a long time." As she grew, she enjoyed performing in plays in junior high and high school and was in band and choir. She has a delightful sense of humor and can really get us laughing. After she graduated from high school in 2015, she submitted her mission papers and was excited to be called to the California Rancho Cucamonga mission, where her best friend from high school was serving. Since our family had served in the pageants in Nauvoo, she wanted to receive her endowment there. She, Dan, and I spent a few wonderful days there as she was endowed, and we attended more sessions together. After we returned home, Heather and I attended the temple together nearly every day until she began her mission. We both enjoyed that. She loved her experience in the MTC, but struggled with depression when she got to her mission and is working in an area in the desert. During her first transfer, she returned home. A few weeks later, she told us she'd been reading literature online about the church and was leaving it. We were devastated. A friend told me I needed to find my new normal, and I realized how important it was to have a loving relationship and that we could communicate and connect on things that were not related to the church. Things were pretty stressful for a while, but we now have a relationship that I deeply treasure, and she is fun to be around. She had a scholarship too and graduated from UVU with a degree in English. I never had any clue that Heather struggled with gender dysphoria, but about 2 years ago, she came out to me and told me she wanted to transition to being a woman. She was going to wait a little while to come out publicly, and that gave me some time to get used to the idea. In 2023, she spoke with the family and told us she would no longer be using her masculine name and pronouns. And I would just like to add to this that Heather works out of state, and soon after we came home from our mission just about 7 weeks ago, she and her girlfriend came to visit. We found her girlfriend to be just lovely and wonderful, and we had a great time together as a family. Some years ago, a relative I loved dearly chose to transition from his birth gender, which was female, to a male. It had been hard for me to feel comfortable using masculine names and pronouns. I felt like I was lying if I did so. When I would send him a birthday card, I would try to find a clever way to address it so I didn't have to use the preferred name. I assumed that I was being more faithful to God as I did so, since I believed that God had made this person a woman. But Ben pointed out to me that on Gospel Library, we were told that it is just fine to use the preferred name and pronouns. This was a relief to me, and I started using the name and pronouns preferred. As I think of it now, I have never read anything in the scriptures or heard anything in general conference that has said not to use preferred names and pronouns, but I have read plenty about Jesus Christ teaching love and compassion, and his chosen leaders have taught the same in general conference. On October 5th, 1999, Ben's 9th birthday, we had a beautiful baby girl that we named Rachel Christine. Ben had been praying for their sister, this time we did know the gender, to be born on their birthday. Although the pregnancy was full term, I didn't have any signs in the morning that she would be born that day. But Ben told me that they had prayed and their prayer was answered. Rachel was born late that night to the delight of Ben and all of the family. Rachel has always had a delightfully funny personality and could make us laugh. She is also very bright and did well in school. She enjoyed acting in plays and was hilarious as a stepmother in Cinderella and Ruth and Pirates of Penzance. She has a beautiful singing voice. Rachel graduated from high school in 2018 and attended Southern Utah University on a full tuition scholarship. While there, she received her call to serve in the Arizona Phoenix mission. She came home one weekend to receive her endowment in the Provo Temple, and it was such a spiritual experience. She loved her mission, where she was very successful in sharing her testimony of Jesus Christ. After her mission, she transferred to BYU, Idaho, and graduated with her bachelor's degree in human resources in December 2023, just days before she married her loving husband, Caden, in the Payson Temple. I have always felt great gratitude to Caden and his family for being so understanding of our family situation. This was an interesting time for Rachel. She confided to me that she didn't want to be selfish, but she wanted her wedding to be her special day and not about the gender identity of her siblings. She had been so supportive, but wanted to enjoy her wedding day. She chose not to ask Ben to wear a pink dress and be an attendant. Actually, Ben was relieved to help her aunt with refreshments in the kitchen. Heather was also supportive of her sister, and the wedding day turned out to be a beautiful and magic day. Matt was on his mission, and we had a cardboard cutout of him displayed at the reception and also in the pictures at the temple. We have a delightful video, too, of Rachel swinging around the cardboard cutout as she danced with her brother. It was a great day. About 3 weeks later, Dan and I entered the MTC in Provo and began our service in the New Mexico Farmington Mission. 8 months later, Rachel received her master's degree from Western Governors University. We were honored to receive permission from our mission president to come home for it. She is straight and very much in love with her husband, who is such a great man we love dearly. On October 3rd, 2001, we had a loving baby boy we named Matthew Harry. He now goes by Matt. I can say loving because he shows so much love to so many people. He even used to kiss my arm at random times. Matt always has a sense for what is beautiful and is sensitive to the feelings of other people. Sensitivity goes two ways, I know, because he gets it from me. We have learned to be careful how we say things because he feels things so deeply and, like his mother, can also get his feelings hurt easily. One year in elementary school, he wanted a princess backpack, just the opposite of Ben and Peter Pan. I didn't want to make him sad, but truthfully told him I was afraid kids would make fun of him for it, and he agreed and changed his mind. He also felt deeply about spiritual things. He got a testimony at a very early age. Just before he turned 8, we were on a family vacation, and he, Rachel, and I were watching Joseph Smith, Prophet of the Restoration, in the Visitors Center of the Washington, D.C. temple, while Dan was with the older 3 kids doing baptisms in the temple. When the video ended, he said, with a look of wonder on his face, "I think I have a testimony." He walked to the front of the small room we were in and shared a simple but beautiful testimony. Shortly after that experience, he was absolutely delighted on his 8th birthday when I took him to General Conference. He has a great love for temples, and as he got older, he would go up and down the Wasatch Front in Utah, seeing how many temples he could do baptisms in. During COVID, he did the same, just sitting on the grounds as they were closed. He loved singing and sang in the choirs in junior high and high school and enjoyed acting in plays. I don't think there has ever been a production of Thoroughly Modern Millie with such a great Bun Fu, or of Mary Poppins with a better Admiral Boom. Even when he had small roles, he would play them so well and put everything into them. Matt did well in school, and going to parent-teacher conferences was fun because all the teachers spoke so highly of him and of all of our children. Matt actually came out as gay as a teenager. I still cringe when I think of what I had been saying the day he came out to me. We were in the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something negative about the gay community, which I stereotyped terribly at the time. I am sad to admit that I felt that I was a better member of the church if I distanced myself from them. I didn't want to be unkind, but I didn't realize that that was exactly what I was doing. I didn't think it was fair that a cake decorator, photographer, florist, or anyone could be sued for choosing not to offer their services for a gay union. I still believe that, but I'm kinder now in the way I think of it. And during Prop 8, I thought it was terrible the way they surrounded the Los Angeles temple, making it necessary for patrons to be sent home early for their own safety. I wasn't considering what hurt was related to the anger being shown and felt justified in blowing off my own anger, not thinking of what these people were going through. I was probably saying something along these lines when Matt got very quiet and said, "Mom, I have something sad to tell you." He proceeded to tell me he thought he might be bisexual, but that he didn't have a strong attraction to girls. I felt absolutely devastated, not just at what he was telling me, but at what I had been saying just before he did. He is so loving and was so forgiving of me, but I needed time to forgive myself, and we all do. He asked me not to tell Dan yet. I wasn't really comfortable keeping such a secret from my husband, but felt like it was better for him to confide in one of us until he was ready to confide in the other as well. I found myself praying that he was just a late bloomer and would develop an attraction to girls, or if he was bisexual, that he would fall in love with the right girl who would also fall in love with him. At that time, Heather had not given any sign of gender dysphoria. Ben had come out as attracted to women, but also had crushes on a few good men, and I had hopes that maybe they were just afraid of the opposite gender and only needed to find the right one. It is so easy to rationalize when you want things to be different from what you are seeing. Matt graduated from high school during COVID in 2020 and then started at BYU doing classes via Zoom. It was during this time that he came out publicly. He knew he needed to tell Dan and sent him a text telling him that he is gay. This was hard for Dan to hear, but he lovingly told Matt that he would be what Matt needed him to be. And Dan reassured me that I had done the right thing in keeping Matt's confidence. Our children truly were blessed with a caring and faith-filled father who thinks celestial. His mission call took longer to get than did those of his siblings. He also struggled with depression. And you can go back and listen to his podcast with you about the time it took because the family service is believing he was suicidal and should try a service mission, but the Spirit telling him to serve a proselyting mission. I love both service and proselyting missionaries, and my husband and I worked with some of the best of both on our recent mission. He also lived in different wards where bishops knew him for only a short time, and at least one bishop wasn't sure if a gay missionary could serve. Finally, he was interviewed by the bishop of our home ward, who had known him all his life, and by our stake president, who also knew him quite well. Our stake president was amazing and worked hard to make sure to word his part in a way that the brethren would know that although Matt had come out as gay, he should be able to serve a proselyting mission. Matt was delighted the day before Thanksgiving in 2022 to open his mission call and learn he would be serving in the Arizona Tempe mission. He tells of his experiences in his podcast with you. He returned faithfully on February 6th of this year, 2 weeks and a day after Dan and I returned from our mission. It was an honor to serve along with him and compare stories during our preparation day Facebook Messenger calls. Through the years that I've experienced this with my children, my heart has changed, and it's continuing to change. Like you said, Richard, in your North Star presentation, we need to wipe our hard drive clean of ideas and prejudices we've had before and replace them with the truths that we learn. During these years, I've tried to do this, and I'm still trying. I have listened to books on tape by those who are walking or whose loved ones are walking this road. I have attended the North Star and Gather conferences and am greatly inspired. Soon after Matt came out, I was speaking with my therapist. She had encouraged me to listen to Questions from the Closet by Charlie Shalati and Charlie Bird and Ben Shalati, and I told her I had tried but couldn't get through a full episode because it was so uncomfortable for me. My therapist told me that I needed to get used to being the mother of a gay son. I did keep trying and got to where I could listen to these podcasts. I've learned that through Jesus Christ, I can do all things as Paul taught in Philippians. I have learned that listening to my children and others who have experienced what they are makes such a difference. I have learned how important it is to challenge assumptions. I had assumed that being gay was a choice, that men without strong relationships with their fathers became gay, and that I was a better member of the church if I was outspoken in a negative way. I needed to remember the compassion my mother taught me when she spoke kindly all those years ago of the lesbian woman who worked with us. The prophet Alma told the people at the Waters of Mormon that they should mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort. That should be done today. We need to help them feel welcome in our meetings and, like my mother, teach our children to treat them with love. I love what Elder Rasband said about being stone catchers instead of stone throwers. This isn't always easy. I was at a church meeting once where a sister I've known for many years spoke up in a very negative way about the LGBT community, saying that we have to love them, but they need to keep the commandments. This is just after Ben came out publicly, but members of our ward who hadn't seen their Facebook posts still didn't know. I raised my hand and said that I was sure many of them were aware that Matt was gay, and then that Ben had recently come out as well. I explained that they need our love and support whether or not they are following the covenant path. People responded with kindness that time. Other times, I have tried to respond to unkind posts on Facebook and ask people to show kindness to members of the LGBT community and have received extremely rude responses saying that we can't condone their behavior. I have tried to explain that we need to love them with no conditions. One person actually told me my children should be in a mental hospital and I should have done better as a parent. I realize that many people on social media are safe behind their phone or computer screens and say things they wouldn't normally say in person. Still, it is hard to stand up for people and be treated harshly. But I believe that we have a responsibility to catch these stones instead of waiting for members of the LGBT community to be badly hurt and feel like they are alone. The criticism we receive is minimal to what our LGBT loved ones face daily, internally or externally. It is part of bearing one another's burdens that they may be light. And this stone catching by others is also so appreciated by parents and others close to these loved ones. At the recent North Star Conference, we were encouraged as parents to have a firm foundation ourselves, and then we can better help our loved ones. I believe that as I keep my covenants with God, my family will receive the blessings of these honored covenants, and that will strengthen them more than anything I can do. As I keep my covenants, I will have the Holy Ghost to guide me, and I need him so much. I will never leave my faith, and I will never leave my family. Our greatest strength comes from the Lord, and he has prepared the way for each of us to return to him and receive of his glory. And we cannot receive of his glory if we are not willing to experience the crucible of mortality. I love what Sister Wendy Nelson said at an evening with President Russell M. Nelson at a worldwide devotional for young adults on January 10th, 2016 at BYU, Hawaii. I pray that this year you will have some moments of anguishing desperation that will propel you farther along the path to become the man or woman you were born to be. Your true self is spectacular. Never settle for less. As we turn to the Lord to help us through the hard things, we will find strength beyond our mortal comprehension, and he will take us to places we never imagined if we were to author our own story. I will acknowledge the grief we as parents and loved ones experience as the expectations we have for our life and that of those we love is different than we expected. When Ben was a baby, I made Christmas stockings for them, Dan, and me. I put their feminine name on their stocking where it stayed for years. I bought plenty of fabrics so that I could make matching stockings as more members joined the family. In recent years, Ben has chosen to use Benjamin's stocking, her brother who passed away. I have taken the letters off of Heather's stocking and replaced them with her preferred name instead. Matt prefers not to be called Matthew because it reminds him of a time in his life when he had less confidence, so I removed the last 3 letters. To me, this represents changes from what I thought would be. For years, I thought of the in-law children and grandchildren that would join our family, and I grieve what I feel is a loss. Something I also grieve is that even as their mother, I didn't see what they were experiencing. I have found that is true of other parents as well. Ben told me nobody is a bigger homophobe than someone trying hard to hide it. I have learned that it is common to have several rainbow children in a family. I encourage parents of these children to reach out to each other so as not to feel alone. I dearly love my children, especially with the changes. Monica Phillips said in her class at North Star that they are still the same person, and I am finding that that is to be true. She also said that when they come out, you actually get your child back, happier. I am willing to walk this road with my children, and I'm grateful for those who are walking this road with me. I especially express my love to my Savior, who has walked every road every one of us has ever faced, are facing, or will face. He sees the whole picture and is with us through every step. He will take us all where we need to be. He only asks us to love our children, and that is something I delight to do. I testify with all my heart that our Heavenly Father loves all of his children and that Jesus Christ atoned for us out of complete love. He does not see anybody as being on the margins. We are all beloved, and through his redeeming power, able to receive of his glory. There is nothing that is too hard for him, and we are not beyond his redeeming reach. I know he has restored his gospel to the earth through leaders he has called for such a time as this, and he continues to teach them and us through ongoing revelation. I know that the Book of Mormon is of him and is another testament with the Bible of the reality of his atoning grace. I know that through him, not only will all be well, but we can find joy now as we turn to him and seek to have his pure love as we nurture those we and he love so dearly. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. A lot of other people just said amen on the treadmill or in the car or wherever they're listening. Barbara, thank you.
I'm happy to share.
I'm deeply moved by some of the things you shared. And I think one of the things that you teach so well is you can love your kids and love the church, and it's not a choice. Here's some things, listeners. You that are regular listeners know that I kind of write things down, my guests' shares that popped out to me. They may be different than the ones that popped out to you. And so I wrote down 11. First thing I wrote down as Barbara was talking is assumptions should be challenged. Next thing I wrote down, number 2, being gay does not make someone a sexual predator. Number 3 is this grace you showed in not using the dead name of your kids and using the name Ben and Heather and they, them pronouns and just mentioning They used to have a feminine name. So I thought that was done with such grace and maturity and thoughtfulness. I love number 4, your focus on the temple. It's just part of here you were proposed to in the celestial of the Provo Temple. I don't know how just a side note, I'm asking you a question. How do you feel about that temple being torn down? That room is gone and being replaced. How did you feel about that?
I miss it. I miss it a lot. I was a temple worker up until we went on our mission, and then it was torn down just a few weeks after we left. And I'm sad, but at the same time, I know that it's God's will for it to happen. When the prophet says that the temple needs to be rebuilt, I believe it, and I'm looking forward to the day when it is rebuilt. I'm grateful to have pictures of the outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Matt's picture for his mission on his plaque is taken outside the Provo Temple, and I look forward to seeing it restored in its glory. I do know from working in the temple that there were some mechanical and plumbing problems. And if you were to ask the director of the laundry downstairs if he thought it needed to come down, he would tell you that it did. It was really sad. Because that has been the temple I've spent the most time in my life. But I know that the Lord has great plans, and it's going to be amazing.
It's a great answer. I love you acknowledge that room's specialty and gone, and love the vision for a new temple there. I love just, you were a temple worker as a single woman back when that didn't happen as much, and your current temple workers in the Orem Temple, and I just, love the connection of the temple. I love your story about Heather. We haven't had Heather on the podcast. You're trans kiddo, and I just love that part of your story too, and just how you talked about all the good that Heather is doing in the world, and I just love that. The next thing I wrote down is, I thought I would be a better member of the church if I distanced myself from the LGBT community. These are like words that I could say about myself too. I sort of thought that did make me a better member, and maybe even the unkind things made me a better member. And I just recognize that's so off what Christ taught. Mm-hmm. And as you...
I'm embarrassed now to think about it. Just ashamed of myself.
I am too. And it's kind of fun to have some of the podcasts in the same era. So I've certainly changed there too. I love you talking about the grace. I wrote this section of grace around the LA Temple and how that was not right for patrons and workers not be able to enter the LA Temple. But I love that you also recognize there was hurt and anger and pain that was manifested in ways on those that were hurting from this. So I thought there was a fair amount of empathy in that, is standing up for our beliefs and what we feel is right and fair, and also acknowledging the tension with other people. I love this section about being uncomfortable listening to Questions in the Closet podcasts, and that's some of my journey too. I've kind of said sometimes when I feel uncomfortable, I assume that's the spirit leaving the room, but sometimes it's not, and sometimes it reflects the personal growth that I need to make through being uncomfortable to be a better disciple of Christ. So you're going to have to figure it out for yourself, because obviously there's times we feel uncomfortable, and that's the Spirit telling us to leave a situation. But I love, this is a space that I think growth comes through being uncomfortable and being proximate to LGBTQ people. I love your line, I love and support them whether or not they're on the covenant path. I feel the same way, listeners. I feel my responsibility is be a gatherer, not a sifter. And like, Barbara's sister Higinbotham, I'm taking her back to her missionary days, we would invite everybody to follow church teachings beyond the covenant path. But on a pragmatic perspective, when people aren't or walk a different road, I just think, we can still love and support them. We don't have to be their judge. We can walk with them. Now, my only exception to that is if that relationship is causing harm and we're in abusive, exactly. And you would agree with that, if we're in an abusive situation, then we've got to be safe. Then this comment, I wrote down the word yikes. You should have been a better parent. If you were, you would only have straight kids. So I'm glad you're laughing. And that's, just where we need to improve.
I wasn't laughing that day. It made me cry.
Yeah.
It really upset me a lot. And I had to remember that this was someone who didn't know me, didn't know my family. And we'll find things like that on social media. Sometimes we have to let ourselves be a little upset and then just go, okay, they don't understand, and move forward.
We had a dad that was on the podcast a while ago, and he has 2 gay sons, and he sort of adopted a parenting strategy that we're not going to have any LGBT kids on my watch, and sort of did the things that dad might do that don't work, to make sure he had straight sons. And he's been on the same journey we've been on. I love you talking about grief with changing expectations. I think that's real. We can support our LGBTQ kids, and I'm using we generally. We actually don't have any in our home, but we can support them. But we also need to take care of ourselves emotionally. There's real grief in changing expectations, and I love that you mentioned that. Then I loved, and I got teary when you went on a practical level about the Christmas socks. I have watched my wife make Christmas socks, knitting, crocheting, whatever the right term is, for these little kids as they were born. And for you to have to kind of process those socks, and what am I going to do about that in our home? And then you've got this sock for your son that died, Benjamin. And you've changed the name of Matthew to Matt. I just think that's a remarkable practical insight into your heart. And with
To me, it just kind of represents the changes that we have to make. And sometimes it's a little painful. It was painful for me to make those changes. But I knew that that was something that would help my children feel like I cared about what was happening with them in their life at this time.
I thought that was just terrific. I've heard stories of parents that will not accept the new name of a child, and that would extend to pictures in the home, which can be tricky. And I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do, and not allowing that name to be used in the home or around nephews and nieces or in other situations. And I'm telling parents that's the right or wrong thing to do, but I think it's good to hear perspectives of yours and just how you're navigating that, perhaps to reconsider that. That may be the right thing. Maybe your personal revelation on best to handle that in your home, but a general feeling is the goal here is to preserve the relationship, and not control the outcome through sort of forced measures that might drive somebody further away. I wrote down a couple comments, and then we can kind of have a discussion. Just a couple I wrote down is, and you've said this without saying directly, but maybe you have, it's not a bad outcome to have an LGBTQ kid or a sibling like your brother, because you go through all the things they're doing that are good, and the lives they're living and the missions they've served, and their ability to be full members of society and contribute in any way a straight person is not, to me, changed by being LGBTQ. In fact, their sensitivity to others, walking complicated roads can often, increase their discipleship to help people feel loved and accepted. So
my brother has been a great support to me as we've walked this road with our kids, and he's just a wonderful person.
Is it healing for him to sort of be a resource for you in this space and has changed?
I haven't asked him specifically, but I think it is. I think it is. And he's just a great person and has been extremely supportive, as have my other siblings.
And that's terrific. And I sometimes use, Apollo 13 on this podcast to talk. If you remember that story, Apollo 13 takes off, and then it doesn't get to the moon. And in fact, it looks like the whole mission is going to be a disaster. And in the movie anyway, everybody at Mission Control is just talking about how terrible this is. But Gene Kratz stands up and it says, "Excuse me, this is going to be our finest hour." And I think this is your finest hour for you and Dan. And you had a lot happen. If listeners listen close to the timeline, this isn't spread out over 10 years. This is like all condensed. And you're on your mission for some of this, and you're kind of, and so this is, I think, your finest hour where you just went to gospel principles, your testimony, the temple, and personal revelation. And it looked like maybe your worst hour with, having LGBTQ kids and even a straight kid that's not participating in the church, I believe, your second kiddo. But now where you are as a family, I just think it's different. But I think it's a beautiful family love story is the words I would use.
We had our whole family together, as I mentioned in my talk here. We celebrated Christmas in February because we got home from our mission just in January, and Matt got home February 6th. And Heather and her girlfriend came out from another state, and we all joined together, and we had the most wonderful time. And there was lots of talking and laughter and food and just fun things we did together. And I just couldn't love my family more than I do.
That's just beautiful. And I love having my brother talks about no empty chairs as he has adult children that don't go to church. And he just said, I'm not going to worry about heaven. I'm not going to worry right now about a future outcome, about empty chairs in our eternal family. I'm going to leave that at the feet of the Savior. I'm going to do what Barbara's doing and Dan's doing. And it does take a two-way street. Some LGBT kids have distanced themselves, or straight kids. So I don't want to make parents feel bad if they can't do what Barbara and Dan are doing, but I love that everybody's there and everybody is enjoying each other, and there's no empty chairs at your table. I think that's great.
We'll leave it up to the Lord. I've turned it over to him, and I know that he'll handle it in a much better way than I ever could.
And that's what Becky McIntosh taught me in her book. I'm glad you referenced that.
Yes.
Talk about, we're promised, I think, it's part of our doctrine, certainly part of conference talks, that if we as seniors, and I'm a senior listener, serve missions as married couples, that we'll be blessed. And you're off on this mission, and tough things happen at home, with kids coming out and changing expectations. I can't remember exactly how much of that happened on your mission or not. Do you feel you were blessed? I think you're going to say yes, but you had complicated things happen.
I do feel like we were blessed. It was hard, and it was something I really didn't discuss very much with other missionaries or members in our area. I just kind of kept it to myself. I felt like my purpose here is to testify of Jesus Christ. And so that's what I did. And I did talk about our family members, but I felt that the blessings came. Ben did choose their name and switch to that while we were on our mission. And Matt had some struggles on his mission, sometimes with other missionaries that weren't as kind as they could have been, and their gay jokes. And that was hard to hear. But I know that we were blessed because, as I mentioned, our family there's still a lot of love. It's challenging. It's hard. We're all trying to fit it together. And sometimes it's harder than others. It's not always laughter and fun like it was at Christmas time. It can be hard. But I felt a really strong peace on our mission. And as I saw the way the gospel blessed the lives of the people that we taught and worked with, we taught a lot of temple preparation classes, and we're able to go, we had 3 members that prepared themselves and received their endowments in the Albuquerque temple. I just felt the peace of the Lord in knowing that everything was going to be okay. And I saw changes in the lives of people that we worked with. And we had a branch of people that were just incredible and so loving and so kind. And I just felt like spiritually the Lord carried us along and helped us. And Dan and I were able to share with each other our feelings and talk about it. And it wasn't easy. It was hard. But it's like Sister Nelson said, sometimes we need those very, very difficult times. Trying to remember the word that she used, the anguishing desperation that will propel you farther along the path to becoming the man or woman you were born to be. And so, yeah, we felt the peace of the Lord. Things were hard, but that doesn't mean that he didn't bless us, because he certainly did. And I can't thank him enough.
other things you'd like to share? Anything else comes to your mind, Barbara?
I just think as parents, we need to give ourselves some grace. My mother taught me when I was college age to be kind, but then sometimes some of these old feelings had come back, and those were things I'd been talking about just right before Matt came out to me. And sometimes I see other people and their families, and I think, well, maybe if I'd done something different, maybe my kids wouldn't be struggling. But then I just think we need to give ourselves grace because God has given us our own challenges that we need to work with. And as hard as they are, he supports us along the way. And I've often wondered, how is it that as my children were growing up, if I was a half decent mother, why did I not notice that Ben, although they loved Peter Pan and they loved dressing comfortably, not such a girly girl, how did I never figure out that Ben struggled with same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, and that they had to come out to me? And I thought, why did I never, ever see that in Heather? I was just totally surprised when I found out that she wanted to transition to a woman. And also with Matt, I guess it was just kind of denial. Oh no, everything's fine. He wanted a princess backpack, but that's okay, and I think if I was a mother and really knew my children, why did I not see these things? But I've come to understand, like Ben explained to me, there's no bigger homophobe than someone who doesn't want people to know. They said we try so hard not to make it known. And we just need to give ourselves grace. And as we meet our children where they are, we need to meet ourselves where we are too, and just say, this is what I'm trying to become, and I have the Savior to help me do it. And at the same time, I'm really grateful for people who have listened to my fears. My sister and I one time were on a drive together, and I just opened up and just told her everything that I was feeling and the frustration and how hard it all was. And I was so grateful to her for just listening to me and not saying, well, you should have done this or you should have done this. She was just very kind and compassionate. My parents have both been gone for a long time, but I feel the love of both of them as I'm trying to navigate this. So forgive yourselves if you didn't figure it out earlier. I'm finding out that's quite common with parents. And just realize that the Lord has a lot of trust in you, and allow yourselves to have days when you just have to speak to somebody and say, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard. I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can do this. And then move forward and trust in the Lord.
That's great. Anything else? That was a great last segment.
No, just I really believe that the Lord has a plan for all of us. And I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in his gospel. I'm grateful to have been able to serve 2 missions and share that gospel. And I know that we can find joy in every day. We don't have to say that someday this will get better. Someday we'll understand, or someday it'll all make sense, which I know it will. But also we can find joy in each day, and that's what the Lord wants us to do.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara Higinbotham.
Thank you.
This has been a terrific podcast. I encourage us to listen, to share it with others. My heart continues to be changed when I listen to people like Barbara. I'm not at the finish line in this space, and I learn new things. And so this is just a terrific podcast, and I encourage people to share this with others, so that they can, when we know better, we do better. And I'm just so grateful for Barbara, and I'm grateful for Ben, who's been on the podcast, and Matt, who's been on the podcast. It's great to have a family, 3 represented from the podcast, and it's just a beautiful family love story. So this is Richard Osler and Barbara Higinbotham signing off on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.